Hey guys, it's me, Father Isaac Maverick Victor Whitlow. So, I was thinking about my videos and the stuff that I say. I know that a lot of the stuff I say, the stuff I say is provocative, right? And and I sometimes wonder, you know, how do people receive it? So I just want to tell you, if you are upset, right? If you get upset when you see my videos, you don't have to you don't have to say anything. I definitely am not doing these videos so that I can debate anyone, something that I'm not really that interested in. Now, a few years ago, I would have really liked to debate someone on, some of these topics, maybe all of them. But nowadays, I just don't see the point of it. Um, the reason I make these videos is so that I can have a catalog of videos, you know, a system, if you call it, or a collection of videos that I can point people to if they really want to know more about a topic when I don't have time to speak about it with them. So today I want to look at the mysticism of the cross. If I feel like I have enough juice to do another video, I'm going to do so. And then I want to speak on the mysticism of the pentagram. But yeah, so I'm not sure if I spoke about the mysticism of the cross in my previous video. On my previous video, yeah, I think I did. And I if I didn't, then sorry, because I sometimes make videos and I don't upload them because I don't like it, or I just didn't record nicely, and so on. So yeah, the mysticism of the cross. So it's very, very interesting that so many pseudo Christian cults don't use the cross. But it's even funnier when you realize that the cross has a pre Christian history. So I remember when I first got into Anglo Catholicism, when I abandoned evangelical Protestantism, it was a very interesting experience for me because obviously I saw a lot of symbols, I saw a lot of icons, I saw statues of the Virgin Mary, of the Blessed Theotokos. I saw, these things that, I didn't know what the meanings of some of these symbols were. I can remember before I had made the decision to become an Anglo Catholic that I saw some Protestant churches with pentagrams on it, and these were Reformed churches and stuff, and they had different hexagrams and all sorts of other shapes and stuff. And I know that I'm not going to mention the town, but the town that I was in South Africa at the time apparently had a lot of dealings with Freemasonry and similar fraternities like that. And I'm not going to speak about Freemasonry and stuff, but I thought it was interesting. But past forward, a few years later, um, I don't know. I just want to take a look at what is using the memory of my computer so that I can just kill it. So so yeah, I'm still not used to the way that MacBooks function, so I'm probably gonna have to kill that. Um, kill that. Kill that. And seems like it's okay now. Sorry. But where was I? But yeah, fast forward, a few years later, after I was a part of the Anglo Catholic Church, I noticed that when, besides doing the sign of the cross in church, which was a big thing, especially for someone that came out of evangelical Protestantism, they also like to do some things like at my chrismation, my confirmation into Anglo Catholicism. Um, the bishop would tell the priest to fold. I remember fold the water or put your hand in it, divide the water 7 times, and I think he put salt in the water. And around that time, I also got to learn because this was the the formative year in joining my formative year in joining Anglo Catholicism. But there were all these interesting things, holy water, and I actually have a bottle here of holy water that I sometimes use just to cleanse um, the atmosphere or the grounds. I do believe that we come into contact with a lot of energies that sometimes rubs off on us, other psychic energy, whatever you want to call it. And sometimes I use holy water, and I made this holy water myself. Uh, and I learned about all of these things. I learned about the usage of the cross, how it's used to for protection. Even this cross that you could argue is an inverted cross, even though it probably is a syncretistic sort of image, the Var course, the wolf cross. There's so many of these things. Um, Interesting aspects of spirituality about certain images that have, very important meanings. Um, I hope that this video doesn't stutter. The thing is, when I leave all of these um, things open, sometimes the RAM doesn't really like that. Now, it's Apple RAM, but you know what I mean. Um, I think it's some of the stuff that I'm opening. I'm not gonna I'm not gonna close this. What else is open? Um, so yeah, yeah, back to these experiences that I've had. But I realized that the universe is a spiritual place. The universe is incredibly spiritual. And wait, I just need to find something else. Uh, what is taking? Oh man. Um, I'm gonna close Pages because Pages is actually running, so is actually making my Mac slow down a bit. Um, yeah, I don't know what that was all about. Um, okay, there we go. So yeah, now there were notes that I wanted to look at, so I'm probably gonna open this on my iPhone. Um, uh, because for some reason opening it up on Mac is not doing it for my current recording session. And it's just that sometimes the video gets laggy, and I'm not 100% sure if everything is recording nicely, and I want the best quality recording, um, so that people can actually hear me and they can follow and not get distracted. So yeah, but I learned about all of these things, and I noticed that, like I said, the world is a spiritual place, and there are certain laws, right? Like, C.S. Lewis in the Chronicles of Narnia speaks about the deeper magic and the deep magic, about the laws that govern Narnia, right? And I think that there's the same laws in the spiritual, physical, mental realms. And what most people don't know is that, you know, the cross has been used in magic, in spirituality for a long time before the advent of Christianity. So let me just make this bigger. Yeah. So then you have to start asking yourself the question, is that a coincidence? I don't think it is. I think that the cross has certain properties, and as my bishop then went on to tell me, that some things are sanctified by virtue of what it is. And if you guys actually do some research into, the mystical theology of the East, you know, the Eastern Fathers, they spoke about how the cross is actually the thing that Elohim used to create the world. So God used the cross to create the world. So that at the cross it was not only spiritual creation, right, or salvation that was enacted, but that it was actually the whole world that was created. So that Christ makes the world by the cross, and he also saves the world through the cross. And this is something that most people don't realize, but it's something it's a very, very valuable thing to realize, and that is that spiritual experiences are usually things that you can't learn in books. Now you might have an experience and you might read a book and you'd be like, okay, that's what I experienced. But yeah, I want to speak more about that, more about the power or the mysticism, the magic, the deep magic of the cross. And maybe I'll do one on the pentagram too. But the reason the cross has such intense presence in both pagan ancient magic, esoteric works, and so on, and Christian theology is that it represents a fundamental cosmic geometry, right? So shapes the reason why reality is the way that it is on the spiritual and physical realm is not simply that it's random, but that it points to certain truths, certain geometrical, mathematical, or spiritual realities. And something to think about too: only reality can exist, only the truth can exist. And that might sound simple to you, but I want you to think about that. Only the truth can exist. So um, I'm reading the notes that I got up here, but before it was an instrument of Roman execution, the cross, and the cross came in different forms, the equally armed one, and the ankh. I actually have an ankh there, but I'm not going to stand up to get it. They were all used, and they represent rebirth, various other things. But in ancient magic, the cross wasn't about necessarily calling on a crucified savior. It was about establishing the center of the universe. And if you look at high magic, they'll speak about the cross. It's a centering thing. But it's very, very interesting that the fathers see this as evidence for everything then coming through the cross. So it's not just an accident, but this is a deep mystical experience of what happens in the cross, and the fact that the God man, the Theanthropos, the bright morning star, sanctifies the wood of the cross, and in that it becomes also this powerful symbol. Um, so there's the Egyptian Ankh, the solar cross, and even the swastika has like the center, as a cross. And swastika just means conducive to well-being. Now I'm not going to get into Nazism and stuff because that's a story for another day. But there's various forms of the cross. So when early Christianity expanded, and it grew into pagan lands, it didn't introduce a foreign geometry. It re-mythologized what that geometry meant, and that was already burnt into the collective consciousness of pagans. And so it was again an issue of veiling and unveiling, because when you go into an Orthodox church, you'll see a lot of philosophers that are honored. They don't have halos, they're not seen as saints, but they're seen as preparationary sort of figures that helped prepare us for various things. And I've spoken about this, with some of my Buddhist friends the about Guan Yin, the Bodhisattva, the Buddha, um, and in Korean it's called Guan Bo Sal. Um, how I really do think that she is the yearning for Our Lady, the Theotokos. And I can tell you in my own spiritual experience, when the Theotokos reveals herself, there's sort of a floral scent attached to her. And I can remember we were at a Buddhist temple. This was in Korea, and I didn't know who Guan Yin was, Guan Seum Bosal. I didn't know who she was. Um, and I heard this Guan Seum Bosal, Guan Seum Bosal, Guan Seum Bosal, Guan Seum Bosal, and very, very intrigued. Didn't really know what I was experiencing, but I could smell the scent that I usually smelt in churches, in Roman Catholic and Eastern Orthodox churches, and I've smelt the scent before. It isn't the incense. It sometimes it can blend in with that incense smell, and this isn't something that if you're not a spiritual person, you won't know what I'm talking about if you haven't experienced Our Lady. But there's this floral scent, and I realized that certain archetypes predates revelation, and the archetype or the symbol predates the revelation, and then you see the eternality of that revelation, and it's like that with the cross. So by crucifying Christ on a physical cross, early theologians argued that God literally anchored the divine blood into the four-cornered geometry of the universe. I want you to think about that. So there's a eternal, once for all type meaning in utilizing the cross. And something that's also very interesting is that when you start to invoke the cross or even other forms of the cross, the Kabbalistic cross, doing the sign of the cross, various things. When I use the cross, um, the inversion of the cross, and many people don't know, doesn't actually invalidate the power of the cross. It still invokes the center of the universe, the power of centering the universe in that one act. So it's a cleansing act, it's a centering act. And so, and it's a act when you invoke the cross. It's an act of centering the universe, of dying to self, of dying. Because many people don't know this, but the story of Yeshua, the story of Christ, isn't just the story of a man that lived 2,000 years ago. It is also the story of humanity itself. And only until you reveal till this is revealed to you, that flesh and blood cannot reveal to you. This is something that you need to engage in spiritual warfare. You must engage in spiritual practice. Until that happens to you, you will not understand what that means. You will not understand that you must walk the same mystical path that Yehoshua, the Messiah, the God Man walked. And this is why St. Paul, he can say, I've been crucified with the Messiah. I've been crucified with Christ. This isn't just something that you read about. This is something that you must experience. And so, what I've seen with utilizing the power, the deeper magic of the cross, is that it invokes a great reality. It centers the universe. It centers creation itself. It gives you peace. Um, so, to understand the mysticism and the mystical theology of the cross, one must step away from the modern flattened views that see the cross as purely an instrument of penal satisfaction or a symbol of suffering, right? Um, in the high mystical tradition spanning from St. Paul, the early Desert Fathers, to Dionysius the Areopagite, St. John of the Cross, Eastern Orthodoxy, Hesychasm, the cross is understood as the cosmic axis, the ultimate paradox, the engine of deification, and the doorway into divine darkness. So, divine darkness is an important concept. because this is apophatic theology. You cannot understand the divine by only cataphatic positive revelation. If I say God is love, if I say God is a gate, if I say God is a door, God is a spirit, you won't understand what that means until you go into a period of unknowing. And that's another thing that the cross does. Martin Luther, interestingly, taught when he spoke about um, two truths in tension. He spoke about the crux theologorum, the theology of the cross, because you crucify your understanding. You crucify your understanding so that you may gain life. This is a mystical approach to this. And so when you are approaching any textbook, prayer book of deep spirituality, you need to understand that invoking the cross is not simply speaking about a wood, whether and whether it's the crucifix, whether it's just a normal old cross. The cross has significant power, and it is sanctified by virtue of what it is. The divine logos, the one in whom all things are made, the blueprint of reality, is centered in that act of the cross. So that when you see a priest doing this, when you see this happening on in church where a priest is doing this stuff. It's a centering of the universe. It's a powerful act. So it's the cosmic axis. So and this is so rich. So whenever you see the cross, whenever you see people doing the sign of the cross, pick it up, do it. And there's so many things that you can do, that you can derive divine energy from that, because by centering yourself in the sacred geometry of the cross, in the life-giving power of the cross, you get divine power. It's not just a power, it's the power of deification, the power of deity that becomes yours. You become in that an inheritor of divine nature. And there's a lot more to it. I'm not going to get into all of the various things, but this is something that I would say, if you want to know more about it, there's so much power in this. So in Denios's The Areopagites theology, God is beyond all human concepts, language, and sensory experiences. The cross is the physical manifestation of apophatic theology, or apophaticism, the total stripping away of the ego and human understanding. This is why St. Maximus the Confessor says that union with God is an ignorance beyond knowledge. It isn't something that you simply think through. This is why Reformed people are wrong, and so many people who try to make spirituality about a theoretical pursuit of knowledge miss it. You need to get your hands dirty. You must approach God yourself. And this is why I loved David Bentley Odd's book, The Experience of God, Being Conscious and Bliss. This is the way to go about it. This is the way. And so this is what the mysticism of the cross is all about. On the cross, the human mind reaches its limit and collapses into the divine darkness, the gnophos, where God is known not through intellectual thought, but through radical union. Think about that. Do it. Practice it. Get a prayer rule where you can start understanding the power of what the cross is, of what it does, and you will see that it is a wonderful thing. Whether it's you say the Jesus prayer and all of this is sacred geometry. There's more to it than, and whether you do it like this, whether you do it like that, whether you do it like that and then that, this is a centering symbol. It's symbols are about bringing truths together, and if you meditate on the cross, it is powerful. It is really powerful. Do some reading on the power, the spirituality of the cross, pre-Christ and after Christ. And when it marries together, you see this beautiful spirituality that can take you deeper into experiencing the divine. So, the great paradox in mystical theology, spiritual reality operates by inverse laws compared to the material world. The cross is the supreme engine of the paradox, and there's three truths here: life through death, Christos anesti ek necron thanatos The whole thing. Christ is risen from the dead, trampling down death by death, and on those in the tombs bestowing life. Power through powerlessness. This is another paradox that is in that. Centering in the cross, the sacred geometry of the cross, the tree of life. And the mystics across the centuries, Saint Ephraim the Syrian, and so many others, mapped the cross directly into the Garden of Eden's tree of life. And maybe you can also look at how that relates to that. So the cross is the engine of theosis. It is the engine of union with the divine because it's the center of the universe. Nothing is in the center of the universe but the heart of the divine, but the divine itself. So yeah, um, the 14th century Rhineland mystic Meister Eckhart, the mystical theology of the cross, he said this about it. He said, "The Father gives birth to his Son in the soul, and the cross is the birth pang of that divine realization." Think about what I'm saying. Is really, really. So the mystical vision or the mysticism of the cross is this. It's geometric. It's the center point connecting all directions of the cosmos. It's transformative. The altar where egoic illusion dies so that divine life can be resurrected in us. And that's a very cool thing. Apophatic. It's the dark gateway where concepts fall away and the soul enters into the uncreated presence of God. It's where we inherit the divine energies, the uncreated energies of the divine. It's the tree of life that heals, holds, and transfigures the universe into an ultimate harmony where God is all in all. And that's why in the Eucharist, it's the transfiguration of bread. That's what it is. Um, so yeah, it's a four-dimensional anchor, right? The patristic tradition uses the cosmic dimensions of the cross to argue for the restoration of all things. And everyone knows I'm all about that apokatastasis. So it's the four-dimensional anchor. Ephesians 3:18 says that believers should grasp the breadth, length, and the height and the depth of Christ's love. Again, that's the cross. It's all manifested. It is the sum and summary of that proclamation of divine love. So Saint Maximus the Confessor had a very interesting thing. So in his work, The Ambigua, Maximus explains Christ's crucifixion accomplished a massive cosmic synthesis, bridging every fundamental division in the created order. So yeah, again, God, creation, angels versus matter, heaven and earth, male and female, paradise versus the inhabited world. So the cross heals the fracture. Christ synthesized them back into an harmonious whole through the cross. And there's so many other things I want to say, but I just want to say about that. If you want to get into spirituality, the power, the sacred geometry of the cross, the power of the life-giving cross. Start there. Thanks.